The Green New Deal. It's a bold plan that, if actually implemented, would change the world as we know it. If you think it's just an ambitious pipe dream, then we just might have some news for you. We'll talk about that next on All Things Beer and Bacon. Ever since Senator Ed Markey and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez released their visionary resolution on a Green New Deal, not a day goes by without some old codger, who will be dead long before the worst consequences of climate change take hold, goes on national TV to declare that anyone who's concerned about these consequences is an alarmist. Patrick Moore, who falsely claimed to be a co-founder of Greenpeace, is one of those guys. Moore appeared on the president's favorite TV show saying the Green New Deal would bring about the end to civilization. Never mind whether what Moore said was true or not, it confirmed Trump's view on a crisis that poses a genuine threat to humanity. But what do you expect from Moore, a guy who once claimed you can drink a glass of Roundup and suffer no consequences to your health? Of course, when the interviewer asked him to drink some of this stuff, he seemed a bit less optimistic.
I do not believe that glyphosate in Argentina is causing increases in cancer. You can drink a whole quart of it and it won't hurt you.
You want to drink some? We have some here.
I'd be happy to, actually, but not really, but
not really.
I know it wouldn't hurt me.
If you say so, I have some glyphosate.
No, I'm not stupid.
Okay, so you.
No, but I know
so
that
it's dangerous,
I
right?
know. No, people try to commit suicide with it and fail fairly regularly.
Tell the truth.
It's not dangerous to humans. No, it's not.
So you're ready to drink one glass of glyphosate?
No, I'm not an idiot. Interview me about golden rice. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, then it's finished. Then the interview is finished.
That's a good way to solve things.
Yeah. You're a complete jerk.
These are the people that Trump is getting his information from because we elected a Fox News junkie as president. Trump doesn't read and skips out on briefings from his professional staff. Instead, he melts what's left of his brain with cable news between 4 and 8 hours a day, accepting whatever the people on the TV tell him. And once Trump gets involved, it's not hard to see how this fake news can spread. Most people probably haven't even bothered to read the Green New Deal, despite the fact that it's only 14 pages long. That's 7 pages less than the menu at the Cheesecake Factory. Anything they know about it probably came from someone else. That's not being very open-minded now, is it? So let's take a look at the Green New Deal and see what it actually says and what it doesn't say. Once you have the facts, feel free to make up your own mind. Once you get past all the smoke, you'll see the Green New Deal is nothing more than a resolution, which is not the same thing as a bill. It cannot become law and only gets the government to recognize that there's a problem. That's it. A link to the official Green New Deal document will be in the description for anyone that wants to read it.
They introduced the so-called Green New Deal. I really don't like their policy of taking away your car, of taking away your airplane flights, of let's hop a train to California, of you're not allowed to own cows anymore.
The document does not specify anything, it only offers broad recommendations. Nowhere in the document does it ban air travel, cars, or cows. In fact, the word cow is never even mentioned in the document. This is all noise from bureaucrats. The Green New Deal has 5 basic goals, but for the sake of this video, we'll only be discussing the first 2 controversial ones. First up is the net zero carbon footprint. Before we start, let's understand how this works.
The fundamentals of climate change have been understood by scientists for decades. To start with, there are naturally occurring gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane in the Earth's atmosphere. In themselves, they aren't bad. In fact, we need them in limited quantities to keep our atmosphere at just the right temperature for life as we know it to exist on Earth. But if we produce an excess of these gases, as we have, the temperature rises, as it has. Warm air has the capacity to hold more moisture, and water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas. So there's even more warming, which means the planet's entire hydrological cycle, the water cycle, is affected. More evaporation, more precipitation, more extremes in general. Humans currently produce around 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. About 55% of that is absorbed by the ocean, land, and vegetation, while the rest remains in the atmosphere.
Okay, let's stop right there. This is the part I want you to understand. In modern times, man has seen to it that we produce more greenhouse gases than the planet can absorb. The gas that doesn't get absorbed hangs around in the atmosphere like a blanket and warms the Earth. You get the idea. Net zero carbon footprint means we need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases so we can get back to the point where the planet can keep up. The Green New Deal does not say ban all greenhouse gas emissions, but reduce them instead. Nowhere in the document does it say to ban anything. That would be impossible with today's technology. To get to a net zero carbon state, we can use technologies that already exist today, such as solar power, wind power, and electric cars.
Hillary wanted to put up wind. If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You told me that one, okay? You know, the thing makes it so...
If wind turbines cause cancer, then anyone with a ceiling fan may as well pick out their burial plot now. The entire country of Holland is shit out of luck. And this poor little guy, well, he's toast. Or bacon. Or a toasted bacon sandwich. Regardless, here's the real reason Trump's against wind power.
The president lost a lawsuit against the Scottish government over a wind farm now complete off the coast by his Turnberry Golf Resort, something he claimed spoiled the view from his property, but a court ruled against him.
Coal, for example, is a big business whose basic business model depends on plundering our planet to keep the profits flowing, no matter the cost. Changes will never happen as long as the coal industry keeps greasing the palms of our politicians.
Between 2008 and 2010, a study of 30 different corporations found that they spent $476 million on lobbying and in return received almost $11 billion in tax rebates.
As always, it's all about the almighty dollar. The second point you want to cover is the infrastructure. This includes items such as our buildings and bridges, as well as the electric power grid. America's infrastructure is in very sad shape and needs to be rebuilt. Power blackouts are a common occurrence when most of the electric grid is made up of 50-year-old technology, such as the New York City blackouts of 1977, 2003, and as recent as 2019.
We're in the midst of what appears to be a colossal and history-making blackout.
People trapped in elevators and buildings. They have activated the emergency command center.
You're staggering, trying to take in as much information as you can.
Mayor Bloomberg's advice is to go straight home.
The subway system is down.
Ottawa is completely without power now.
The lightning-quick domino series of failures.
Gotta go to the bathroom and you can't even go nowhere.
50 million people are thought to have lost power.
In 2003, a massive blackout struck major areas of the U.S. and Canada and was perceived as a wake-up call for the nation.
We've got a real crisis in our grid, and this is why, despite being a superpower, we have a grid that is comparable to a third world country, and that's not right.
Every few years, we upgrade the electronics we own, including our cell phones, but most of the electric grid is 50 years old or older.
The most important engineering feat of the modern age that we all take for granted is the power grid. And here's how it works. It's a network of power plants and transformers connected by miles and miles and miles of power lines carrying different amounts of voltage. In the United States, the grid is divided into three main smaller grids called interconnections. There's the Western Interconnection, the Eastern Interconnection, and the Texas Interconnection. Don't mess with our interconnection. Each interconnection is governed by either a single control center or a consortium of control centers that monitor and regulate the flow of electricity with thousands of sensors. Since the demand for electricity is changing all the time and the power cannot be stored, the control centers are continually adjusting how much power is being generated and where it's being sent. But things could be better. For one, the actual physical infrastructure needs to be updated. A lot of the equipment is over 50 years old and requires constant fixing. Another improvement would be the much talked about smart grid. The smart grid is a fashionable term used to describe the power grid with improvements that would make the grid more efficient and more reliable. For one, the grid needs to be overlaid with digital computers and communications, or digitized. Right now it's still analog like Grandpa's VCR. Here are the big things we could do to make the system smarter. 1. More sensors and more types of sensors. Everything from newer power line sensors, smart meters, and even smart appliances. When everything on the grid is talking to each other, fluctuations in supply and demand can be anticipated and outages can be avoided. A smarter grid is a grid with more real-time communication. 2. Decentralize more power centers, just as Texas has its own power grid. Damn right! If cities had their own self-sufficient microgrids, they would be more prepared for power demand fluctuations. 3. Build mega battery arrays for the grid. Energy sources like wind and solar are only sources of energy when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. With huge battery arrays, energy can be stored for use when these sources are offline. Also, let's say the wind is blowing when demand is low. Right now, wind turbines would be shut off and valuable wind energy would go to waste. With a big battery, we could store this energy and use it for later. 4. This isn't really part of what we would call the smart grid, but it is an improvement that would be a smart thing to do. Above ground power lines are subject to all kinds of dangers that could be avoided, like the weather. Move as many lines underground as we can. It's not like this has never been thought of. The problem is the same problem that's stopping us from fixing all the highway systems and upgrading our schools. Money and politics.
Nobody takes responsibility for anything.
The grid isn't the only part of the infrastructure that needs upgrading. In 2018, a Florida International University pedestrian bridge collapsed, killing 6 people and injuring even more, with 8 vehicles being crushed underneath. This just goes to show how bad the situation across the country really is. If we're going to rebuild, then why not do it in an environmentally friendly way?
A sustainable world has already been invented. It's right outside. How is this being done, and how can we mimic it? We think of CO2 as the poison of our era because we have such an excess of it. But in the natural world, CO2 is a building block. Anything green that you see, from algae to trees, is composed of carbon dioxide. And anything hard in the ocean, like coral reefs or shells, they're made from dissolved CO2. Concrete, which is our largest building material, releases a ton of CO2 for every ton of concrete. 6 to 8% of all CO2 emissions are concrete. With coral reefs, it's the opposite. CO2 is sequestered in the reef. So there's a company called Calera that was started by a coral researcher. And he took the recipe from the coral reef, and now he takes CO2 from smokestacks, bubbles it through seawater to get the minerals, and out precipitates the raw material for cement, which is then used to make concrete. If we began to think of CO2 as a feedstock for our stuff, it might be a way to begin to use some of this excess CO2.
Most politicians have expressed their desire to rebuild the infrastructure. It's a big campaign topic. But when you include it in the Green New Deal, all of a sudden it's taboo just because of politics. You can't have it both ways. The Green New Deal is nothing new. It's a collection of non-binding ideas that we've all talked about before. Everyone agrees that air pollution and collapsing buildings are bad things. We can continue to point fingers and call names all we want, but meanwhile, hurricanes still ravage our coast, wildfires still burn our forests, and people still die from collapsing infrastructure. We're going to address these issues sometime anyway. Why not do it now when we still have time and a choice, instead of later when we don't have either one? If we missed anything, tell us in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Thanks for watching All Things Beer and Bacon.
Here, I've got an experiment for you. Safety glasses on. By the end of this century, if emissions keep rising, the average temperature on Earth could go up another 4 to 8 degrees. What I'm saying is the planet's on fucking fire. There are a lot of things we could do to put it out. Are any of them free? No, of course not. Nothing's free, you idiots. Grow the fuck up. You're not children anymore. I didn't mind explaining photosynthesis to you when you were 12, but you're adults now, and this is an actual crisis. Got it? Safety glasses off, motherfuckers.